The seamstress's son gave his last money to an orphan girl, and 20 years later found himself on the operating table. That sunny, scorching morning, Osvaldo woke up to the sound of his mother's song. As usual, she was sewing, humming something soulful and sad about lost love under her breath. She was a romantic, his mama, a sentimental woman who had somehow managed to give birth to him as if jumping onto the last train of her fading youth and beauty. She wasn't old at all, just past 50. Osvaldo himself had recently turned 10, that wonderful age when you're still a child, yet already beginning to understand so much about the adult world. Even now, he could sense that his mother was in a good mood, and decided to approach her carefully. "Are we having breakfast, Mama, or do you have another urgent order for some fashion lady?" he asked cautiously. Osvaldo was proud that excited women from all over the city came to his mother, dreaming of dazzling everyone with one of her unique dresses at their next special event. Dolores truly had a gift with a needle. As Coco Chanel once advised, she could make a hat, a salad, and a scandal out of nothing. Sometimes they brought her dull, lifeless fabrics, and she would turn them into something irresistible. The ladies swooned and always paid her generously beyond their agreement. $10 from each order went straight into Osvaldo's savings. He was dreaming of a miracle of technology, his very own personal computer. In his treasury, hidden inside a bright tin cookie box, he'd already gathered a decent amount. But it still wasn't enough for a full set. After all, a computer needed a monitor, a keyboard, a mouse, cables, flash drives, a whole treasure chest of tech. "Go wash up, my darling wonder," called the seamstress. "I made arepas early this morning. They're in the kitchen, wrapped in towels to keep warm. I'll just brew some coffee and get the jam." Dolores looked tenderly at her son. So many of her friends had tried to talk her out of having him. "Dolores, you're crazy," they told her. "You're having a baby by a married man who only visits once a week. He has neither feelings nor responsibility. How will you raise a child relying only on your sewing skills?" She would only smile sadly, gazing at her fellow unfortunates, other lonely divorcees and old maids whom life had brought together into their warm, soulful little circle. Dolores had honestly tried to explain herself. "Girls, I'm 42, and there's no new husband in sight. Felipe, he's just a little gift for my health. Before him there were a couple of others, same kind, married men, all of them. It was convenient, that's all. I know I'm no beauty queen, never was. A child, that's my joy, my comfort in this restless life. So I'll have one myself and raise it myself." End of discussion. After sighing a bit more over their less than lucky womanly fates, the honest company soon turned to more cheerful topics, like how to set up a cozy corner for the newborn in Dolores's big room, and what should be done before the baby arrived. After all, a baby in the house, that's a sign, a promise of maternal happiness for years to come. When Dolores's unfortunate beau learned that his lover was in the family way, his face broke out in red blotches. What if his wife found out about his timid adventures on the side? He had only dropped by that other woman's place for a light, as he liked to say. It all started after a tipsy evening, right around March 8th. His wife had caught a cold, and he'd stopped by the seamstress's to pick up an order for her. Later he came again, this time with flowers and chocolates. He couldn't forget those empanadas that had won his heart. While he waited for the dress to be ironed, Dolores offered him coffee. He looked around the small one-room flat, no trace of a man's things, and imagined himself on some gallant rescue mission. He strutted about, proud as the men in the smoking rooms who boasted of their romantic conquests. He wasn't one to fall behind. And so their semi-marriage went on for 3 years, until the day he found out his sweetheart was pregnant. Then he vanished like smoke. "Dolores, you always knew I'd never leave my wife. I never promised you anything, and you seemed fine with our little affair. But a child, my dear, don't you think you're a bit too old to be a first-time mother? If you need money for an abortion, I can help with that." Dolores smiled ironically. "Felipe, calm down, for heaven's sake. The baby will even take your surname. Medina, it sounds nice, doesn't it?" Felipe glanced around nervously. Was he really sleeping with a madwoman all these years? He was talking about serious matters, about helping her end the pregnancy so they could both go on living freely, and she was already thinking about the baby's surname. He'd never understand women, what they truly wanted. One thing was clear, he wasn't coming back here again. From now on, it was just his wife and the children he already had. As for Dolores, finita la cumbia. And so Felipe vanished from Dolores's life, leaving behind only a pair of slippers, a toothbrush in the bathroom, and a bottle of aftershave as mementos of his existence. Sometimes, when he came to stay for a few days, supposedly visiting his mother in the countryside, she had bought him those small domestic comforts. To her own surprise, Dolores hardly noticed his disappearance. Everything had unfolded just like in Shakespeare. The more has done his duty, the more may depart. Throughout her pregnancy, she worked tirelessly at her sewing machine, bringing to life countless dresses, blouses, suits, and skirts, dreaming up ever more inventive designs. Her mother and grandmother, both seamstresses and dressmakers, had long since passed away, but they'd managed to teach her their modest yet reliable craft. Frail in health, they had died within a year of each other, barely past 60. Dolores, however, had taken after her father, strong, sinewy, and resilient. She lacked the soft femininity of fuller figures, being lean and wiry instead. Lively eyes, a small upturned nose, and full lips, that, in short, was her portrait. As for her character, she was an incurable perfectionist, meticulous to the core. Yet she possessed one undeniable virtue: loyalty, to her work, to her friends, to her promises. If she told a client that an order would be ready by 10 in the morning, it would be ready at 10 sharp. Dolores was also kind-hearted, neither greedy nor vindictive. In that sense, Osvaldo was lucky to have been born to such a mother. Mother and son ceremoniously made their way to the kitchen, where the coffee pot gurgled warmly. They sat properly at the table. Both loved these unhurried morning rituals with arepas or tamales, planning the day ahead, sharing bits of news. That morning, Osvaldo, his mouth full, was eager to tell Dolores that just a couple more months of her hard work, and he would finally have his electronic friend. He didn't just dream of a computer, he ached for one. For nearly a year he'd been patiently saving every banknote, bill by bill, denying himself even small treats: no ice cream, no movies. He economized on everything. Dolores affectionately ruffled his curly hair. In looks, he was a mirror image of Felipe, tall for his age, with dark wavy hair, big hazel eyes under soft lashes, and gentle, deliberate movements. He was barely 11, with a whole life ahead of him, but Dolores somehow knew the genetic foundation would remain the same. She loved her son with a fierce, aching tenderness. When she held him close, the ice of loneliness inside her seemed to melt. After Felipe, she'd had a few brief affairs, so insignificant she could hardly recall the men's names. They had flashed through her life like quick comets across the night sky, and disappeared into nothingness. Some women are given love for a man, others, love for a child, and then no one else on earth is needed. Dolores belonged to the second kind. She and Osvaldo were inseparable friends, true companions. She had even begun asking his advice when he was no more than 3. "Which scarf and gloves should I wear with the gray coat?" she'd ask. The boy would look up at her with wise little eyes and solemnly point to one set or the other. And they say children don't understand anything at that age. Nonsense, Dolores thought. After seeing her son off to school, she closed the door behind him and, as so often before, thought to herself, "A good boy, truly. And not just because he's mine, I'm being objective. Studious, loves math. When he gets a perfect score, he glows with joy. And such a kind soul. Just think of that little bird, the one Osvaldo had brought home recently and nursed back to health. When it recovered, they took it together to the school's animal corner. The biology teacher said that come spring, once it was strong enough, the whole class would release it into the wild." Osvaldo was technically too young for biology lessons, but the teacher lived in their building. They sometimes ran into each other and helped one another when needed. The woman had a weak heart and was taking more and more sick leave. The deputy principal grumbled, too many absences, and no substitute available. When the administration's patience finally wore thin, they hired a young teaching college graduate to take her place. The elderly teacher, Señora Concepcion, was deeply hurt. She began to feel unnecessary. Her only comfort left was her 10-year-old granddaughter, Soledad. The girl's parents had died together, tragically and banal at once: fog, a slippery road, a speeding truck, the driver losing control. Their car had been crushed into a metal ball, leaving no chance of survival. By a cruel twist of fate, Soledad was left an orphan. Thankfully, the guardianship authorities had no objections. The grandmother was of sound mind, an experienced teacher, with a good apartment, all perfectly respectable. But Concepcion could never come to terms with her daughter's death. Her heart began to falter, fluttering, then pausing, frightening her with its unpredictable rhythm. While she was still working, she could afford her expensive medication and keep her pulse under control. But now, with Soledad, she barely scraped together enough for pills. The tiny teacher's pension and the child's allowance covered only rice, beans, and milk. Pasta with cheap grated cheese, that was their daily fare. On holidays, a few candies and a bit of sausage. On ordinary days, rice, beans, and potatoes, boiled or fried. And of course, there were the utility bills to pay, curse them. But I can't go begging on the streets, thought Concepcion bitterly. Such was the fate of retired teachers. On their well-deserved pension, there was no way to live in dignity. I'll have to take my medicine every other day, thought Concepcion. That way it'll last longer, and Soledad won't notice. Imagine, the girl was only 10, and yet she could already cook simple meals for two and go shopping on her own. Soledad was sitting on the windowsill in the stairwell, crying quietly. Hot tears streamed down her cheeks. From time to time she gasped for breath, then froze in fear that someone might hear her sobbing. A door slammed upstairs. Someone was coming down the stairs. She had to pull herself together, though what could a 10-year-old possibly know about willpower? She knew only one thing. She had accidentally discovered that her grandmother was hiding part of her medicine and was slowly fading away. She had said nothing, not a word. Instead, she decided to go to the store and write a little sign, "Please help my grandmother buy medicine. Anything you can spare." She didn't yet understand what humiliation was, or the kind of fear that eats you from the inside. Her heart was burning only with love for the one person she had left in this world. Osvaldo was coming down the stairs, shifting his heavy backpack that kept sliding off his shoulders. In his mind he was calculating where to start assembling his dream. Probably the processor, that was the heart of it, after all. His thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound, quiet, sorrowful sniffling. He felt it instantly, as if the air itself told him that someone nearby was in trouble. He rushed down and saw, on the windowsill, crying softly, his classmate. "Soledad, tell me right now what happened," he blurted out, shocked. "Concepcion, she's sick," the girl sobbed. She hadn't wanted to complain or talk about her troubles to classmates. Such things were for adults to solve. Soledad knew that all too well, and she was terrified that if people found out about their hardships, she'd be taken to an orphanage. But Osvaldo's eyes were so kind, so attentive, that she couldn't hold it in any longer. Taking a deep breath, she blurted everything out. "After my grandma retired, our situation got much worse." Even she was surprised by the adult words that came out of her own mouth. It was, no doubt, the result of growing up next to a grandmother who was a teacher. The sentences flowed naturally, clear, precise, reasoned. "My grandma has a bad heart," she continued. "As long as she takes her medicine, she's more or less fine. But now we've run out of money for it. I don't want to go to an orphanage. That's why I keep it secret, at school, and from the neighbors too." Osvaldo didn't hesitate for a single second. "Wait here, and stop crying. I'll help you," he said shortly. A moment later he was already running back home, straight to his piggy bank. His thoughts were a blur, but one thing he knew for certain. If I knew my mother's life depended on medicine, would I really care about anything else? And the computer, he had lived without one before, and managed just fine. It was only a thing, a toy, even if a useful one, but not something that could ever compare with saving a life. He rang the doorbell so forcefully that he nearly knocked over Dolores when she opened it. "Don't ask anything, Mama," he panted. "I need to give all my savings to a friend. I know how hard you worked for this money, but I promise, I'll start over from scratch. Right now, it can save someone's life. I know you'll understand." Dolores said nothing. She only thought to herself, "He's older than his years and kind like me. How glad I am that all those years ago, I didn't listen to that worthless Felipe, who only ever thought about himself and his pleasures." She kissed her son on the crown of his head, wisely deciding not to ask who he was giving his savings, and his dream of a computer, too. If he wanted, he would tell her. If not, so be it. She was proud of him, and that was all that mattered. Soledad was still sniffling quietly, sometimes whimpering like a stray puppy left out in the cold. When Osvaldo came running back, breathless, and handed her a thin bundle of bills neatly wrapped in paper, the girl couldn't believe her eyes. "Osvaldo," she whispered, her lips dry with emotion. "But we can't pay you back. What if you change your mind? Then we'll owe you forever." "Don't be silly, Soledad. It's my money. Well, the money my mom saved for me, for my dream." "What were you going to buy?" Soledad asked, stroking the bundle of notes nervously. "There's so much here, Grandma will have medicine for a long time. I don't even know how to thank you," she said honestly. "Just spend it wisely," Osvaldo said solemnly. "Now come on, we're late for class. If we hurry, we'll at least make it to the second lesson." Otherwise, the vice principal will give us another lecture about discipline." Soledad looked up at him with her gray-green eyes and shook her head. "You go, Osvaldo. I'm going home first, then to the pharmacy. I won't show the money to Grandma. I'll quietly take the prescription from her box and buy a big supply of pills. I know how to count. She takes 2 a day, so I'll get enough for several months." She clasped Osvaldo's hand tightly, then rose on her tiptoes and kissed him on the cheek. "Thank you," the girl whispered. "You're a true friend. I'll never forget this moment, or you, no matter what happens in my life." A lot would happen in Soledad's life after that. The money Osvaldo had given her so generously was enough to pay for her grandmother's medicine for almost a year and 2 months. Throughout that time, they remained close friends. Sometimes they did homework together, though Soledad always hurried home. Leaving Concepcion alone for too long was dangerous. Before long, the school found out that the fragile balance in the girl's household rested entirely on her childish efforts. At first, guardianship was officially arranged, and after her grandmother's death, Soledad was adopted by a wealthy, childless couple. She and Osvaldo had to part ways. Her new parents lived on the other side of the city. It seemed the strong thread of their childhood friendship had snapped. Her grandmother's death left an indelible mark on Soledad. Her guardians, and later, her adoptive parents, were decent, respectable people, but Soledad couldn't help it. Love for them never took root in her heart. They never even truly became friends. Her new parents weren't cruel or unkind, far from it. They were simply dutiful. They believed that adopting a child meant feeding, clothing, and educating her. But that a child also needed warmth and affection, this thought never seemed to occur to them. Life in the house ran like clockwork: rise, wash, go about the day's business, return home, eat dinner without unnecessary talk, go to bed. No carefree weekends, no shared holidays or moments of laughter, only routine, only duty. To their credit, they never stinted on her education or development. They fulfilled their parental obligations with precision, and Soledad never disappointed them. She studied diligently, almost effortlessly, and spent all her free time buried in books. She had a clear goal: to become a doctor. At first, she dreamed of something else, becoming a rescue worker. But later she decided that doctors, too, were warriors, only on a different battlefield. "I'll save people, alone or with a team, but I'll save them, no matter what," she often thought. In her dreams, Soledad saw herself standing at an operating table, scalpel in hand, giving her assistants the signal to begin the surgery. She entered medical school easily. Her adoptive parents had paid for excellent tutors, and her own foundation of knowledge was strong. In her final year of high school, Soledad fell in love for the first time, truly fell in love, with a young man named Matias. It happened unexpectedly, when he stepped in as a group of rowdy men began harassing her on the bus and followed her off at her stop. Matias seemed to appear out of nowhere, blocking their way. A few swift, precise blows, and the bullies scattered, spitting curses as they fled. He picked up Soledad's handbag, which they had torn from her hands, wiped a bloody finger across her tear-streaked cheek, took her by the hand, and led her toward the park. "What are you doing wandering around so late?" he asked. "It's not safe in this neighborhood at night. Were you looking for trouble?" He was rough around the edges, solid as a young oak, and as straightforward as a line on a blueprint. Handing her a man's comb, he said with a wide grin that revealed 32 perfect white teeth, "Get yourself together. Come on, let's get acquainted. I'm Matias." He shifted his sports bag from one shoulder to the other, pulled out a bottle of water, and handed it to her so she could wash the fear and tears from her face. "Do you live around here? I'll walk you home," he offered. From that evening on, they were inseparable. Matias worked at a local club. By day it was used for fitness classes and physical therapy, and at night it transformed into a fighting arena. He was one of its best modern gladiators, rarely lost, and earned well from his bouts. For the first time since the deaths of her parents and Concepcion, Soledad felt that she was truly loved. Matias wasn't a man of great learning. After high school he had finished a technical college in construction, worked a few months at a building site, and quit. He decided instead to dedicate himself to sport, where he had always excelled, especially in boxing. He had never been trained for the Olympics. No one was willing to invest in a promising fighter without a guarantee of stable profit. Instead, they molded him into a wild hero, untamed, fierce, predatory, capable of earning his trainer enormous returns. His main sponsor was the owner of that gritty gym, and he never once regretted the investment. But with Soledad, Matias became a different man. Everything coarse and superficial that clung to his image as a fearless fighter melted away in her presence. With her, he grew shy. If his friends had known, they would have laughed him out of the ring. He dared to kiss her only on their third date, and when he realized that she had never been intimate with anyone, he didn't rush to claim the title of first. He waited half a year. They became lovers on her birthday, her 18th. Until then, Matias had never cared how old his casual girlfriends were. But with Soledad, he wasn't afraid of gossip or judgment. He loved her, respected her, and felt deep compassion for the orphan girl whose story he knew. By 18, Soledad was already studying in medical school. She had devoured volumes on human physiology, and though she had no woman in her life with whom to discuss female things, and her adoptive mother had never shown warmth or trust, Soledad was perfectly aware of what happened between a man and a woman. She understood everything, and treasured the tenderness with which Matias treated her. She wasn't afraid of anything. She simply waited for him to grow ready on his own. A lady shouldn't be the one to push a man toward that step. Let him act of his own free will. For her 18th birthday, Soledad's parents gave her a trip to the seaside, a whole week of rest. It was still spring, but on the coast even March felt warm, orchids were already in bloom. She'll catch up on her studies later, they said. Matias secretly booked a room at the same seaside guest house at his own expense, his surprise for the girl he loved. Work could wait. A man had a right to his own happiness. Soledad was beside herself with joy when, at breakfast the next morning, she suddenly discovered her beloved sitting at the neighboring table. It was still far from high tourist season, and the resort was quiet. Her adoptive parents had taken her to the seaside before, but those stiff, dull trips could hardly compare with this one. They walked the whole day, until at last they sat down on a bench, too exhausted to take another step. They barely made it to the taxi stand. And then came their first night together. When they returned from the coast, Matias and Soledad had already decided they would marry in a year. He hoped to save enough money for an apartment. After all, they couldn't live with his parents, who loved to tipple, as he put it, and her adoptive parents were unlikely to welcome such a son-in-law. They never spoke openly about marriage, but Soledad knew well enough Matias would never be truly accepted in that house. They never did marry, not after a year, nor after two. Soledad became more and more absorbed in her studies, while Matias lost a few key fights and fell out of favor with his sponsor. His winnings shrank drastically. There was no longer talk of buying an apartment, just of getting by, for himself and for his parents, who always looked to him with weary hope for some money. Gradually, there was less and less for Soledad and Matias to talk about. Their conversations filled with pauses, awkward, empty silences. A gulf grew between them. They both tried to revive the warmth they'd once shared, but deep down they knew their love story was nearing its end. It hadn't withstood time and circumstance, those most ordinary, most destructive forces that can break even the truest bonds. Their meetings grew rare, polite echoes of what had once been beautiful. Each secretly longed to end them, yet neither wanted to be the one to take the final step. Then chance intervened. In the second semester of her third year, Soledad began her clinical practice, and a difficult one at that, with regular visits to the morgue. Her professional destiny was being tested, to be or not to be a surgeon. Specialization would come in the fourth year, but now was the moment to find out, could she handle working in the anatomy department or not? After her first visit to the morgue, Soledad knew instantly she felt comfortable there, calm, like a snake basking in warmth, though the thought sounded blasphemous even to her. Within those walls, among the forever still bodies, sorrow was always present, someone's grief, someone's story. That evening, she met Matias. Out of habit, she told him about her impressions from the realm of pathologists, mentioning that one of the most famous specialists in the field had chosen that career because he couldn't handle operating on the living. Among the dead, however, he felt at peace. Matias shuddered. Her composure unsettled him. The ease with which she spoke of such things made him realize she had become a stranger. They both had. Being a straightforward man, he didn't hold back. "Soledad, I've been meaning to talk to you." She tensed. Her intuition whispered it was the end. Her Matias was too cold, and she herself was still half lost in thoughts of the morgue. The tenderness and thrill she once felt for him were gone. "Our relationship has run its course," he said finally. "I don't want to deceive you anymore. I see you now more as a friend than as a woman I love. I think it's time we part ways. We're too different. We see the world through different eyes, and we've stopped seeing each other through the eyes of love." He was sweating by the end of his long speech, but he believed that leaving any other way would have been wrong. There was too much shared between them to make their farewell cruel. Soledad stayed silent. He was right, her loyal Matthias, her knight, her first man and friend. Their love was dead. Ah, Matthias, my Matthias, you're right, alas. No black cat had crossed their path, only the quiet death of something once rare and beautiful. I accept your verdict, she said softly. It's honest. I won't even say let's stay friends. Let's end it here and now. But if one day we ever need each other, we'll know we still exist, for one another, as kind, familiar souls. They parted without bitterness. Matthias hurried off to training, eager to reclaim his lost champion's title. Soledad buried herself in textbooks. An exam was tomorrow, and she hadn't read a line. A chapter in both their lives had been turned forever. Later, they ran into each other a few times by chance, exchanged greetings, and went their separate ways. There was nothing left to say. Osvaldo, meanwhile, finished school with a solid record, much to Dolores's joy. She too was thriving in her sewing business. First, she made a stunning dress for the wife of a high-ranking city official. Then for her friend, the spouse of a local trade magnate. Dolores had truly outdone herself, and the ladies were grateful. One helped her with the paperwork to open her own fashion boutique, encouraged her to rent a small space, and soon after, to buy it out, for a symbolic price. The small mansion had been officially registered as an old, non-historic building, though in truth, it was a former merchant's nest. After renovation, the house was transformed, and soon the entire city was talking about Dolores-style atelier. One client even persuaded her husband to lend Dolores money, interest-free, on her word alone, and later arranged for her to spend a few weeks at a sanatorium when her thyroid began to act up. Dolores could no longer manage the business alone. Under her direction now worked 10 seamstresses, 2 cutters, and 3 ironing assistants. On the atelier's premises, she had even opened a small restoration workshop for repairing fur and leather items. Her little family enterprise was growing fast, confidently climbing to the top of the city's tailoring Olympus. Even with the expanded staff, they could barely keep up with the flood of custom orders. Wearing clothes from Dolores' style had become fashionable and prestigious. With all this success, Osvaldo finally said goodbye to his childhood dream of becoming a king of IT. His mother invested so much energy and money in him that he felt he had no right to stay a child any longer. It was time to grow up and take responsibility. He didn't agonize over his choice of university major. He entered the law faculty. Law is always useful, he thought. At the same time, he began studying English and Portuguese seriously. Now he had a new dream, to see the world and earn enough to show that world to Dolores. He even considered learning conversational French and Italian. Mama must see Paris and Milan, the capitals of fashion. In his 3rd year, Osvaldo switched to the evening, part-time, program. His classmates teased him. Osvaldo, we're heading to the bar again, come party with us. You're always running home to mommy. Watch out, the girls will stop loving you. You're going to miss all the fun with your great business. Neither his mother nor his university friends knew that things in Osvaldo's personal life had long been going quite well. His girlfriend was 15 years older than he, and he couldn't have cared less what anyone thought. It was she who hid behind her cocoon of insecurities, avoiding being seen with him in public. They had met at the supermarket. The woman had loaded her cart with so many groceries that she could hardly pack them into the flimsy plastic bags, which were already tearing in her hands. Plump, rosy-cheeked Rosario was exhausted. Her 5-year-old son Emiliano was home alone. What if he woke up and got into something dangerous? The neighbor who usually watched him for half an hour had gone to her daughters in the countryside, but they couldn't sit at home without milk and bread. Seeing her futile struggle, Osvaldo came over to help. Then he walked her home, and there the door was opened by a tousle-haired boy who immediately showered him with questions. Who are you? Are you going to live with us now? Will you be my man friend? 'Cause I don't have a dad, the boy said, lowering his head sadly. It's just me and Mama Rosario. Will you stay for dinner? Mama made my favorite mashed potatoes. And sausages, the kid kind, from Rabbit. There's a bunny on the label. And my train's broken. It won't move, doesn't whistle, just sits there quiet. Osvaldo suddenly remembered himself, small, waiting for a man who came to visit his mother. Then Dolores would leave him with Concepcion for a few hours, and he would hope, with all his heart, that this one would stay forever, that maybe this man was his father. Taking the boy's thin hand, Osvaldo followed him into the room. What's your name? Emiliano. Well then, show me your train, Emiliano. Osvaldo fixed the toy, then read the boy a story and stayed for dinner in Rosario's cozy apartment. Having lived his whole life with his mother, he was used to, and good at, talking to older women. After all, he had grown up among Dolores's friends, among women like Concepcion, among his school teachers. His manners were impeccable. When she saw him to the door, Rosario suddenly blushed and said softly, "Osvaldo, come visit us again sometime. Emiliano would be so happy." He turned back with a wide smile. "I'll definitely come. Even my mom doesn't make mashed potatoes this good. And Emiliano needs his man friend, right?" On his way home, the successful first-year university student walked almost skipping, light, cheerful. He hadn't felt this way since childhood, since being beside his mother. Now, after spending an evening in the home of strangers, he suddenly realized that this unfamiliar place had become oddly dear to him. He didn't yet know that Rosario was 32. Her age didn't even cross his mind. He was simply enjoying the moment, and that was enough. The next time he dropped by Rosario and Emiliano's apartment, it was on impulse, yet it looked as though they had been waiting for him with open arms. The woman was in the kitchen, pulling an apple pie out of the oven, while Emiliano sat in the living room, deeply absorbed in a large picture book. Osvaldo, who so resembled his biological father Felipe, looked older than his years, while plump, cheerful, round-faced Rosario seemed younger than the age listed on her passport. Standing side by side, a stranger might have said, "Yes, she's a little older, 5, maybe 7 years, but no more." Rosario didn't try to hide her age from Osvaldo. What was the point of such Madrid court secrets? She sent the boys to the nearby kiosk for ice cream, calling after them, "The pie today is sweet, cherry with compote. I think a bit of ice cream on top won't hurt our little feast." Later, all three of them watched a new animated film on TV, savoring the treats Rosario had prepared. Osvaldo didn't want to leave. He knew his mother would again be at work until late, adjusting the new, state-of-the-art sewing machines at her atelier. He and Rosario finally parted only near midnight, after they had tucked Emiliano into bed. They lingered in the kitchen, talking for hours. That evening, Rosario told him her story, how she had once become pregnant by the owner of the jewelry kiosk where she worked. She had come from a remote, forgotten village, the kind of place where no young people stayed because there was simply no work. Her parents somehow survived off their orchard, vegetable garden, and a small plot of land where they grew potatoes, cabbage, beets, and carrots. They sold the surplus at a nearby station whenever a passing bus happened to stop there. Pennies by city standards, but enough to make ends meet. Her parents had practically pushed her out to the city. With her secondary school diploma, she was able to enter only a trade college, majoring in non-food merchandise management. She barely graduated. The village school had given her little real knowledge. Each teacher there covered several unrelated subjects, juggling math, literature, and geography as if they were one and the same. During her 4 years of study, Rosario lived in a dormitory room with 3 other country girls, all runaways from rural life. For many of them, college ended early. Healthy young women quickly found themselves pregnant by city suitors. The lucky ones married, the rest became single mothers, surviving in the city on the margins or returning in shame to their parents' homes. After graduation, no one wanted to hire Rosario for a proper merchandiser's position. She lacked experience and understanding of market trends or consumer demand. Retail required wit, flair, and an instinct for fashion, qualities employers doubted a shy village girl could have. She ended up in the jewelry kiosk after seeing a sign in the window, "Saleswoman wanted." The owner, Rafael, a sort of local merchant Suleiman, a man with a sharp eye for flashy trinkets, imported cheap costume jewelry from the East. The goods weren't high quality, but they sparkled brightly and sold fast. Young customers swept the shelves clean within weeks. Business was brisk. Rafael, a stern, quiet man, long married and 25 years older than Rosario, began the job interview without preamble. "If I whistle, I'll have a line of girls begging for this job. But you'll do. Young, healthy, from the countryside, means you're hardworking. Besides selling, you'll sleep with me now and then. Don't take it the wrong way, it's life. My wife's ill, and finding someone new every time isn't convenient. I'll rent you a room and pay you well." At first, Rosario was stunned. Just like that, bluntly, without shame, she was offered the role of mistress to a man old enough to be her father. When she told her dorm mates, they practically squealed with envy. "Lucky you, Rosario. You won't have to go crawling back to your miserable village." They tried to convince her. "What are you hesitating for? You're no princess with blue blood. The man's offering you a room. Do you even realize?" Rent would eat up most of your salary. Say yes. If someone made us that offer, we'd run to him ourselves. Don't be foolish, Rosario. He might change his mind. Maybe give us the address of that kiosk? I'll go offer myself instead. So Rosario surrendered to circumstance without a fight. She began selling exotic Eastern trinkets at the kiosk and moved into a small one-room flat in an old building, a charming relic with high ceilings, ornate moldings, and a bay window. In the alcove overlooking a quiet street, she placed 2 mismatched armchairs from a flea market and a small coffee table. She now lived like a real city lady. Raphael turned out to be an undemanding man. Friday evenings were reserved for their meetings. Afterward came a hearty dinner, to restore my strength, as he liked to say. Rosario was a wonderful cook, and he savored her homemade meals. Then he returned to his wife until the next Friday. In that quiet, peaceful rhythm, both at home and at work, Rosario lived for 6 years. Then, out of the blue, she became pregnant. At first, she panicked. Then, suddenly, she felt calm. She decided she would not get rid of the baby, no matter what, even if her lover and benefactor turned his back on her. But Raphael behaved like a true gentleman. He made things clear at once. I won't leave my wife, that would be absurd. We'll stop seeing each other, we've already crossed too many lines. But I'll make sure you're provided for. I own an apartment that I inherited from my late uncle. I've been renting it out, but now it's time to put it to good use. You'll stay under my care until the birth, and then I'll sign it over to you. Think of it as alimony for all the years ahead. But don't expect me to acknowledge the child, I can't risk any future claims. And that was that. Rosario accepted the arrangement with quiet satisfaction. No, Raphael wasn't disgusting to her. She even felt a certain fondness for him. And as for the baby, she was genuinely happy. She had just turned 27. What more could life possibly offer? Osvaldo listened to the young woman's confession and thought about how many heroines of unfortunate love stories around him had never managed to find a steady partner. Dolores, when discussing this topic with her equally single friends, loved to share her own theory. Ah, girls, what can we do? There have always been fewer men born than women, that's nature. All we can do is sing about it. Because, statistically, for every 10 girls, there are only 9 boys. My mother and grandmother used to say that every woman gets at least one piece of happiness in her life, her share of a woman's joy. Some get it for 3 days, some for a few years, and some for a lifetime. What matters is to recognize it when it comes, to hold it tight, and make the most of it. And if you're really lucky, that happiness will even bear a child. Look at my Osvaldo, he's my life. And now Rosario Osvaldo looked at her for the first time not as someone he had helped carry groceries for, not as a woman who cooked the best mashed potatoes and heavenly apple pies, but as a woman. He let his gaze linger, as men do, pleasant features, a hint of fullness, kind blue eyes, light curls framing her face, a healthy blush on her cheeks. What more could admirers possibly want? He wondered. Why is she still alone? He said nothing aloud. He only decided that since his mother was now often away on business trips, sourcing fabrics and accessories for the atelier, he'd drop by Rosario's more often. After all, who said a man couldn't be friends with a woman 15 years his senior? Those were just prejudices. They remained friends for several more months. The 3 of them still watched television together, ate Rosario's freshly baked pastries, and invented games, robbers, pirates, dinosaurs. Osvaldo even assembled and gifted Emiliano a full collection of dinosaur figurines. Until one day, on a warm afternoon, Osvaldo found Rosario home alone, without Emiliano. She explained that summer had come, and she'd sent her son to the countryside to her parents, to breathe fresh air, eat fruit and berries straight from the tree. Osvaldo told her that his birthday was coming up, he'd soon turn 19. Rosario laughed. Good heavens, has it really been more than a year since we met? How quickly it's flown, your company is so warm, so easy, and Emiliano's so used to you already. She walked up to him, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him. You'll probably celebrate your birthday with your friends, so let my gift come a little early. I like you so much, you're kind, genuine, generous. Let heaven close its eyes for a moment, I'd like to be closer to you right now. That day marked the beginning of something new, and it lasted more than 2 years. Osvaldo saw Rosario regularly. He couldn't say he was madly in love with her, but he always went to her home with joy. He was wanted there, by both the woman and her son. Soledad, meanwhile, was burning with excitement that day. No wonder, her small group of select students were about to observe their first gastric resection surgery. The patient had been stabbed in the abdomen by a gang of thugs who tried to rob him of his wallet and expensive phone. He had fought back fiercely, cutting through a vacant lot on his way home to a new apartment he had just bought. The gang, a pack of brutal teenagers, had seen a well-dressed man and smelled easy prey. The wounded man was discovered thanks to a woman walking her dog late at night. The animal, having eaten something bad, kept pulling its owner outside and was the first to reach the man lying in a pool of blood. The woman didn't panic. She had spent years caring for her sick father and knew how to find a pulse. Under her fingers, a faint thread still beat. Dawn was breaking. A new day was entering the city, carrying with it a fragile hope that things would turn out well. The ambulance and police arrived quickly. The only thing the man managed to say before losing consciousness again was, "7 of them. I had time to count as they came closer. They hit all at once, didn't give me a chance to react, then pain and darkness. When I woke up, no one was there." Even a quick examination revealed that the stab wound had been both precise and cruel, punishment for resistance. At the hospital it became clear that without partial removal of the stomach, the man wouldn't survive. The emergency surgery was scheduled immediately, and coincidentally, it aligned with the students' clinical practice. They were allowed to watch from an observation room with a large glass window. Soledad followed every movement of the surgeon with bated breath. Her heart seemed to skip beats in rhythm with the operation. She compared what she saw through the glass to what she had studied in theory, silently repeating the names of the instruments and listening to her own feelings. Did she still see herself as the one standing at the operating table someday? The answer was clear, more than ever. Since her breakup with Matthias, she hadn't seen anyone for over a year. Strangely for her age, she didn't think about love at all, only about medicine. Even her usually distant adoptive mother had once asked, with curiosity rather than reproach, "Soledad, do you really not like anyone in your class? And what about in the surgery department? Not a single handsome young doctor. You'll turn into a nun at this rate. No parties, no flirting, no cafes or nightclubs. You can't live on textbooks alone. It's absurd for a beautiful young woman. I never approved of your relationship with Matthias, but at least then I knew you wouldn't wither away over your notes. You're 22 now, think about what I've said." Soledad thought about it for exactly 3 minutes, then dismissed it completely. After that first operation, which she had watched for all 3 hours without moving, more invitations followed. The man who had been the victim of the mugging recovered successfully. Word even reached Soledad that he had found the woman with the dog, the one who had discovered him bleeding on the wasteland and given him first aid. Apparently, they were now in love. At the hospital, people joked. "Imagine, that's how the guy found his true love. Must have been written in his fate." Soledad was no fatalist. She firmly believed that waiting passively for gifts from destiny was a waste of time. Everything in life had to be built, created, and nurtured by one's own hands. She respected the saying, "God helps those who help themselves." If that mugging victim hadn't been too lazy to walk around the vacant lot, she thought, he wouldn't have courted such a tragic fate. Soledad didn't believe that a man could find the love of his life in such a way. To her, love, like a career, required work. She and Matthias had never done that. They had simply drifted along. And the result, of course, had been predictable. They drifted apart. The next chapters in the career of the future surgeon, Soledad Valdez, resembled a steady climb up a professional Everest. Already in her later years of medical school, she never avoided hospital duty shifts. She loved that modern, well-equipped city hospital, and especially the surgical team, every one of them a first-rate professional. As her mentor, she chose the kindest of them all, the Dr. Javier, a gentle giant whose experience, as he liked to joke, was longer than most people live. Patients began to smile the moment he entered their room, and under his booming, jovial voice their fear of surgery would melt away. Sometimes he'd come in and start telling stories in his rich bass, and within a minute, the whole ward would be laughing till their sides hurt. Soledad often rejoiced that she'd never slacked off, not in school, nor during her residency shifts. Officially, she had 2 or 3 shifts a month, but she was always ready to take 4, even 6, anything to be near Javier, to assist his patients, to learn, and learn again. The senior residents warned the newcomers. Your mentor will turn you into his personal secretary, bury you in case files you'll have to summarize concisely but precisely. You won't have any time left for real surgery. But her mentor was different. From her very first shifts, Javier had felt familiar, almost like family. She admired his precise, fluid movements during every operation. And when Javier first allowed her to assist at the operating table, Soledad could have jumped through the ceiling with joy. The older residents, veterans of sleepless nights, warned her, "Give it a couple of months of non-stop shifts and endless surgeries, and you'll be howling from exhaustion and monotony." But that never happened. She still awaited each operation with the same impatience, as a chance to see more, understand more, master more. Javier would occasionally glance at her with approval but say nothing, until, 10 months later, he summoned her to his office. "Soledad, get ready," he said. "Tomorrow you'll be performing your first independent surgery, removal of a lipoma. Let's go through every stage of your debut from start to finish. We'll begin with the theory." Her knees nearly gave way with shock. Though truth be told, she'd been waiting for this moment every day, every hour. "I'll be right beside you," Javier added, giving her an encouraging pat on the shoulder after they'd gone over the procedure in detail, possible risks, the patient's condition, all of it. "Don't worry. We all had to start somewhere. My first surgery wasn't easy either, removal of a large uterine fibroma in a very young woman. A couple of years later, I ran into her by chance. She was pushing a stroller with twins. I was damned proud that they existed partly thanks to me. We managed to save her uterus, remove the tumor, and do no harm." They discussed a few other patients, and Javier praised Soledad for her precise and thorough medical reports. She went home walking on air, rehearsing every detail of the upcoming operation in her mind. And her debut was flawless. The young resident performed confidently and accurately, without a single mistake, smooth as clockwork. Later, when she modestly treated her colleagues to snacks and soda in celebration, everyone in the surgical department congratulated her sincerely, without a trace of envy. In that profession, people knew how to rejoice in real talent. Javier was the last to speak, his deep voice booming across the room. "Well then, Our Lady Surgeon, welcome to the Harbor of Healers. I'm proud of you, Soledad. You'll make a fine doctor, a true Esculap." After that first operation came many others, a whole procession of them. Soledad approached each case with the same curiosity and care. She didn't want to become a mechanic with a scalpel. Her goal was deeper, to know everything about her craft, and if possible, even more. Her theoretical knowledge grew steadily. She never missed a single worthwhile medical article in the field of surgery. Within 3 years, she was trusted not only with routine appendectomies and hernia repairs, but also with complex operations requiring instant decision-making and a steady hand in unexpected situations. Javier would tease her. "At this rate, my dear Soledad, you'll soon outshine this old man. And I'll be glad for it. The good Lord himself kissed you on the crown and blessed you for this profession, gifted you with rare talent. I'll have a worthy successor." On the personal front, however, nothing had changed. Her brief fling with one of the young surgeons couldn't be called serious. History, it seemed, had repeated itself. He never wanted to discuss anything meaningful. Leaving the hospital each night, he seemed to erase from memory everything that had happened there, the patients, their lives, their suffering. He was always grumbling at Soledad. "Are you here with me right now, or still back there, with your patients? You're going to burn yourself out from the inside, and then nothing will matter to you. Take my advice, once you step outside, forget everything until the next day. And you even run to the hospital on weekends. They're already calling you in after hours. That's not healthy. They tried that with me once, when the on-call doctor got sick. I told them flat out, not happening. I've done my day's work." Soledad looked at him with indignation. "Then why," she asked sharply, "did you choose a profession built on compassion, on being ready to help the sick at any moment?" What could he possibly say to that? None of his arguments would stand. The man just slipped an arm playfully around her shoulders, his whole posture saying, "Conversation over, my mind's made up." She pulled away, but didn't make a scene. Her voice was calm, clear, and final. "We have no future together. In a man, I look first for a friend, not only a lover. Your attitude toward our work, our calling, is unacceptable to me. Let's end this here." She erased him from her life without a trace of regret. All those cupids and arrows, that wasn't her story. She truly lived, truly breathed, only in those moments when she said to her assistants, "Let's begin the operation." Dolores, now past 70, had visibly aged and weakened. Her troublesome thyroid had flared up again, exhausting her nerves with unpleasant symptoms and forcing her to spend time in a sanatorium to prolong her remission. The management of the company had long since passed into Osvaldo's hands. He handled the business wisely, expanding the chain of tailoring studios across the city. Under the Delora Style brand, they now produce not only custom garments but also limited collections of ready-to-wear fashion. When the second large atelier opened, Osvaldo surprised his mother with a gift, a tour of France and Italy. After the trip, they couldn't stop joking. Paris, they laughed, is a boa constrictor. It swallows you whole, forever, making you fall hopelessly in love. And Milan, that one's a charmer, lifts your spirits, spins your head, fills you with inspiration. By that time, Osvaldo had already parted ways with Rosario. The age difference wasn't the real reason, though it had begun to show. The real turning point came when life threw Rosario an unexpected twist. Emiliano's father, Rafael, the very man who had once promised to disappear forever, suddenly reappeared. He told her that his wife had died after a long illness. He wanted them to reunite and live together again, for their son's sake. His grown children from that marriage lived far away now, in other cities, and he rarely saw them or his grandchildren. Osvaldo was stunned when he learned that Rosario had agreed to such an arrangement. But she explained her decision with cool logic. I'm almost 40, Osvaldo. You and our relationship was never going to end in marriage. Rafael still has his own business, in a field I understand well. How much longer can I sell bread in a bakery kiosk? I have to think about my future, and about 12-year-old Emiliano's. We can still see each other, if you'd like. Something tells me my future husband's passion level is already close to zero. Osvaldo didn't like that sweet deal one bit. The idea of sneaking around with another man's wife repelled him. They parted peacefully, like ships at sea, grateful to each other for everything good that had been between them. Sometime later, he began an easy, unburdened relationship with a young production technologist who had recently joined his company, Catalina. Her outlook on life turned out to be unusual. She set the rules immediately, right on their first dinner date at a restaurant. Osvaldo, I know perfectly well how relationships between men and women usually end. So I'll state my terms up front. You invited me here with a certain intention, let's not pretend otherwise. My answer is yes, I'll be with you. But if we ever marry, it will be a guest marriage, no domestic chores for me. A child, only on my conditions. And at work, no talk of men's versus women's roles or capabilities. If I prove myself, you'll promote me to deputy. Osvaldo was taken aback. He thought, this one she's either a bit unhinged or just outrageously bold. But God, she's fascinating, I like her. Maybe it's even better that she's so blunt, without all the nonsense. To his surprise, their affair turned out to be long and full of fire. Catalina became a loyal and competent partner at work, too. With her involvement, the company expanded further and flourished. Then she began to change. She started leaving in the middle of the day for urgent personal errands, canceling dates on flimsy excuses, and eventually refused to live with Osvaldo altogether. He searched his soul, probing its deepest corners, in vain. Just as it had been with Rosario, he didn't feel great, blazing love for Catalina either. There was only a touch of affection, a handful of warmth, gratitude for the time they had shared, nothing more. Delora stopped urging her son to make it official with Catalina. She could see it in his eyes, there was no love there. So this woman, too, was not his. Reality, as it often does, had proved harsh. Later, the truth came out. Catalina's older brother had been released from prison, where he had served a sentence for large-scale fraud. The Delora Style Company had no professional security service. Only one woman handled hiring, and there was no separate HR department, no background checks, no screening of employees for suspicious family connections. After his release, Catalina's brother wasted no time tailing his sister's comfortable life. Out of nowhere, he showed up at her door and announced, "Our parents are old, sister, nothing to be done about that. We have to help them, that's how it is. But you, tell me everything about the company you work for. How it runs, what it owns, how it breathes." Catalina had feared her brother since childhood. He had always been coarse and cruel. She had never once complained to him, even when someone at school hurt her, knowing all too well how such things ended. Once, when a boy jabbed her in the face with a spruce twig, her brother broke the boy's arm on the spot, so he'd remember not to mess with you. Nothing happened to him afterward. The boy's parents, seeing the hulking high schooler, were too afraid to press charges, fearing revenge. He had been a good student, excelling especially in mathematics. After finishing school, he graduated with honors from the university's mechanics and mathematics faculty, then earned a second degree in economics by correspondence. Exams and tests came easily to him, but he had no intention of becoming an upstanding citizen. Catalina never knew whose accounts he had vacuumed clean, but when they finally caught him red-handed, the sentence was long, 10 full years. When he went to prison, she had breathed a sigh of relief. Her brother, already a property owner by then, but still a frequent visitor at their parents' house, had always filled her with a sacred terror, his mocking grin, his sneering remarks about her silly little studies in textile technology. Now, finding her again in the fashion world, he even praised her. "Well done, little sister," he smirked. "Looks like you might actually be useful to me now. You know what's most valuable on the market these days?" Catalina recoiled, shaking her head in fear. "You're behind the times, kid. What's hot right now are antique properties, historical treasures. You're going to help me squeeze that fancy merchant's mansion, your company headquarters, right out from under your boss and boyfriend." "Let me go," Catalina begged. "I can't do that. I don't want to." "You won't have to do anything complicated," he replied coldly. "Just get me the ownership papers for that property. Copies will do, but originals are better. And keep me informed where your boss goes, what meetings he has. Later I'll tell you when to arrange a meeting with him. I already have a buyer lined up for that 19th century trading nest of yours." Catalina was terrified of her brother, almost pathologically. Prison had only made him more ruthless and unhinged. Even behind bars, he had carried himself with arrogance, certain he was smarter and craftier than everyone around him. He'd made useful contacts and earned the respect of the Brotherhood with his uncanny skill at gambling and never losing. He'd spent months in solitary confinement and never managed to convince the authorities that he'd reformed enough for early release. But once free, he launched a new, elaborate scheme. He somehow obtained documents proving that the merchant mansion had been purchased illegally, with forged papers downplaying its historical value. He then unleashed a barrage of government inspections on Dolores style. Fire safety, sanitation, tax authorities, police, every possible agency descended on them in turn. Osvaldo was harassed to exhaustion. He could see it coming. They were going to seize the mansion, perfectly legally, under the pretext of a reappraisal and confiscation. Meanwhile, Catalina began avoiding him. There was always some excuse. That Friday evening, worn down by stress and desperate to talk to someone who understood the business, Osvaldo decided to go to her apartment. He needed to speak to anyone who might grasp what he was going through. He had kept the full extent of the trouble hidden from Dolores. Catalina was home, pale, haggard, but seemingly glad to see him. "Osvaldo, I wasn't expecting you. The fridge is empty, but there's a pack of good empanadas in the freezer. And tomato juice. Will you join me? I'd drink poison from your hands," Osvaldo joked. "I'm starving, empanadas sound perfect." Suddenly, Catalina burst into tears and threw her arms around him. "I've betrayed you, Osvaldo. I've turned into a real snake, the kind you warm on your chest and it still bites you." She didn't have time to finish. The doorbell rang. Before she could stop him, Osvaldo was already in the hallway, quicker than she could say a word, as if fate itself were directing their every move. A second later, her brother's mocking laughter boomed from the kitchen. Well, look who we've got here. The big boss of Dolores style himself, visiting my dear little sister. And my future brother-in-law, too. Having a cozy dinner, lovebirds?" Gathering her courage, Catalina snapped. "Leave us alone, please. For the sake of our blood. There are hundreds of companies in this city. Why do you have to sacrifice us to your greed?" Osvaldo stood frozen, confused. He didn't understand what was going on. Trembling, Catalina suddenly lunged at her brother with her fists. "You've sucked the life out of me. I love Osvaldo. Do you hear me? I love him. Do you even know what love is?" Neither man could have imagined what would happen next. Catalina snatched a kitchen knife from the table, her eyes wild, and charged at her brother. He lunged forward, trying to wrench the weapon from her hands. Everything unfolded in slow motion. In one sudden motion, her brother grabbed Osvaldo and yanked him toward himself as a shield. The blade plunged beneath Osvaldo's ribs. His body went limp. He collapsed to the floor. Catalina let out a scream that tore through the walls, fumbling to pull the knife free, but her hands were shaking uncontrollably. Then her brother's furious roar thundered above her. "Idiot! What have you done? Don't touch anything. Call an ambulance, now." Osvaldo heard none of it. He had lost consciousness immediately. The instigator of the scene caught him for a brief moment but couldn't hold him. He lowered him to the floor carefully, trying not to stain himself with the blood already spreading across the light-colored sweater. A dark pool grew wider and wider on the tiles. Both Catalina and her brother knew without a doubt Osvaldo's life was now measured in minutes. With a wound like that, there was little chance he'd survive. Soledad's shift was drawing to an end. A full 24 hours on duty always left her with that familiar mix of pleasant exhaustion and quiet anxiety. Out of habit, she wanted to make sure of everything, how the post-op patients were doing, which nurse was taking the next shift, whether all the doctor's instructions had been properly recorded in the case histories. She walked down the long corridor of the surgical ward, tugging off her cap as she went. That morning she had pinned up her thick hair in a rush, and the clip had been pressing into her scalp all day. There had been no time to fix it, of course. Soledad had just turned 32, not yet a mature woman, but no longer a girl. The endless worries about her patients, the nights haunted by lives she couldn't save, had left their imprint even on her appearance. A thin silver strand had appeared at her temple. At first, she wanted to dye it, but the hairdresser had protested. "Oh, no, don't you dare. That's actually fashionable now. Women bleach a single lock to look refined, sophisticated. Yours is natural, it suits you. These days, that touch of aristocratic fatigue is in style. The whole elite is faking it." Soledad had smiled to herself on the way home. Well, look at that, she thought, I'm finally keeping up with the trends. It was a pity her adoptive mother, who worshipped beauty salons, knew nothing about such modern styles. She had already scolded her, saying it was improper for a young woman to walk around with gray hair at her temples. But now, the perpetually weary surgeon had a solid argument in her defense. Her train of thought was abruptly broken by shouts from the emergency intake downstairs. She caught only fragments. Too much blood loss, this one's critical, even a miracle won't save him. Pulling her cap back on, Soledad hurried down. Tonight she was being relieved by a young surgeon, a recent resident, still unsure of himself. If the case was truly dire, he might not be able to handle it. In the examination room, Soledad found the young doctor completely lost. She immediately took charge, assessing the situation, and only then, glancing at the patient's face, did she recognize him at once. That familiar mop of unruly dark hair. The large brown eyes, now closed. It was Osvaldo, her childhood friend, her neighbor, her classmate. The boy who had once given her the money that bought her grandmother precious extra months of life. In the bleak loneliness of her orphaned youth, Osvaldo and his mother had been her only rays of warmth and kindness, apart from her beloved grandmother, Concepcion. Soledad forced down her emotions. After 24 hours without sleep, she knew she couldn't afford sentimentality. Even the best doctors were only human, and exhaustion always made them vulnerable. She straightened up and spoke in her firm, commanding tone. "Prepare the operating room. I suspect the right lobes of the liver are seriously damaged. Send his blood tests to the lab immediately. And stop trembling, doctor, you'll be assisting me. Call the anesthesiologists. Every minute counts." Saving the life of her childhood friend, the boy who had once given her hope, was now more than just a matter of professional duty. It was personal, a matter of principle. She was startled by her own thoughts. She had never reacted like this before, she didn't even know what had come over her. If I save him, she thought, I'll save myself. Everything will change. I'll finally know I chose this path for a reason. Maybe then I'll learn to slow down, to live beyond the operating room, to find some simple, human happiness. Then she mentally scolded herself. You're losing it, woman, 24 hours on duty, and you're already dreaming about miracles and happy endings. Next you'll be demanding a star from the sky, or an island of your own, just to get away from work. She snapped back into focus. Silently, she prayed that the massive blood loss hadn't destroyed all her chances, that the patient's vitals would hold steady long enough. Osvaldo remained unconscious. A stubborn image flashed before her eyes, a little boy, beaming with joy as he handed her a thin bundle of bills, the very money that had once saved her grandmother's life. Everything that followed unfolded strictly according to the surgical protocol for a right lobe liver resection. Soledad's fingers confidently clamped the ruptured vessel. So far, so good, she thought, then said aloud. We'll need a vascular suture. Proceed. So carefully, you're doing excellent work. When we're done here, we'll inspect the entire abdominal cavity for any other damage. The operation was coming to an end. Soledad was satisfied. The removal of the damaged lobes had gone smoothly. The patient's chances of survival were steadily rising, though recovery would be long and difficult. She found herself admiring the neat, almost elegant catgut seam across her childhood friend's abdomen. In time, she thought, the scar will fade, turn pinkish, barely visible. The important thing is that he lives. Now came the next challenge, stabilizing the stomach and ensuring every postoperative process ran like clockwork. She noticed the awe in her young assistant's eyes. "Soledad," he breathed, "I couldn't stop admiring you today. You're a surgeon sent by God. It was an honor to stand beside you at the table. I'll remember this day forever. Now I know exactly what I'm striving toward. Forgive me for freezing up at first. I never would have managed this case. There were too many risks. But you handled it flawlessly." "Nonsense," Soledad smiled gently. "You just need more practice, more hours in the operating room than I've had. Your time will come." And now she pulled off her gloves with a sigh. "I'm going home. Honestly, I can barely stand on my feet," she admitted. "Keep a close eye on his vitals, stay in touch with the ICU. Keep me updated. Tomorrow's my day off." As the orderlies wheeled the stretcher away, the young surgeon whispered under his breath, "She's special. Surgeons like her are one in a million. I'll never reach her level." Meanwhile, Soledad rode home in the ambulance that had offered her a lift. Most of the city's emergency crews knew her. She had assisted this very team twice before, during industrial accidents where patients had to be operated on right at the factory infirmary. Now her colleagues had just delivered another man to the ER, one suspected of internal injuries. Fright had numbed his pain, but the quick tests looked good. Soledad felt sure her young colleague could handle the case without her help. That was her life in a nutshell. Nearly all her memories revolved around the operating table. She didn't even think about the fact that, today, she had repaid a debt to the kind boy from her childhood building. Her grandmother, Concepcion, had always told her, "If you do good for someone, forget it. Let the person you helped be the one to remember." Osvaldo remained unconscious for several days. At times, the doctors feared his body wouldn't hold out, that something might go wrong despite the successful surgery. Soledad spent long hours by his bedside. She couldn't shake the feeling that something important was shifting in her life, that this encounter with the echoes of her past might be the turning point for both of them. When Osvaldo finally woke, she was there. At first, he didn't recognize her. His mind was still clouded, flashes of a sad little girl with two thick pigtails tangled with the image of the beautiful young woman beside him now, her hair escaping from under a surgical cap, her eyes holding that same familiar sadness, or perhaps quiet weariness. Then, suddenly, recognition dawned. "Soledad, is it really you?" She nodded, smiling softly. "Yes, my good neighbor, it's me. Have I changed that much?" He wanted to say not at all, but his lips betrayed him. "A little," he admitted, then quickly corrected himself, though only slightly. Soledad's voice grew serious. "The investigator's been here twice. He said the woman's been arrested. The man escaped. They haven't found him yet." The images of that cursed evening flooded back to Osvaldo, but he pushed them away. He would deal with it all later, once his strength returned and his mind was clear. As if sensing his thoughts, Soledad added, "You'll be in the hospital for at least 2 months, and that's if you follow every instruction to the letter. Then a long recovery at home." "Thank you, Soledad," Osvaldo said quietly, squeezing her hand. "You saved my life. You were just there, right when I needed you. That's fate. My mother likes to say," she smiled, "that the thread always follows the needle." "Then I'm your thread now," he joked. "Where you go, I follow." Brilliant surgeon, kind and strong, Soledad Valdez hurried into a beauty salon. She was absolutely certain now that silver strand at her temple had to go. To hell with trends, she told herself. "I want my hair the color it was when I was 10. The next day, a cheerful female head peeked into Osvaldo's room, her hair pulled into 2 playful pigtails. Soledad's eyes sparkled with joy. "Osvaldo, what's taking you so long? Dolores baked empanadas to celebrate your discharge. She's been waiting, and you're still fussing over your outfit." "Well, I can't look bad when I'm walking beside such a beautiful woman," he grinned. "But weren't you supposed to be on duty today?" "You won't believe it," Soledad laughed. "For the first time in my life, I traded shifts with another surgeon. I think I've earned at least a little piece of simple, human happiness."
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.